Celebrating 30 years of phenomenal trend forecasting, 5 times a week, Monday through Friday. Here's Gerald Celente with today's trends in the news.
Hi, this is Gerald Celente. It's Thursday, January 3rd, 2019. And here are some of today's trends in the news. On the market front over there in Asia, another down day. In Europe, everything down. Here in the States, big time down. Dow is down over 700 points, closed down around 660. NASDAQ down over 3%. Oil up a bit, gold up, and Bitcoin down. And our Bitcoin analyst, Jonathan Cho, is warning of a big Bitcoin correction on the downward side. But this morning, we sent out a trend alert just as the markets opened. The markets, buy, sell, hold, or gold. And we warned of more of a downturn, gave the reasons why. One of the reasons the markets went down on the big news was yesterday's report, as we reported in Trends in the News last night, of Apple's very poor earnings report. And what did they do? Well, their CEO, Tim Cook, he blamed it on those rising trade tensions over there in China. Here's what he said. While we anticipated some challenges in key emerging markets, we did not foresee the magnitude of the economic deceleration, particularly Greater China. Well, we did. We've been talking about it for a long time. He goes on to say, we believe the economic environment in China has been further impacted by rising trade tensions with the United States. You know what that is?
That was bullshit.
That's bullshit. For the last 2 years, Apple's been losing shares in China as competitors come in with more innovative and less expensive products. He goes on to say, as the climate of mounting uncertainty weighed on financial markets, the effects appeared to reach consumers as well, with traffic to our retail stores and our channel partners in China declining as the quarter progressed. The consumers could care less about tensions. They care about money in their pockets. And that's why auto sales in China fell 3% in 2018, their first decline in about 2 decades. The combination of trade tensions and consumer jitters have stalled sales in a country that historically has been considered the source of growth for the industry. It has nothing to do with trade tensions. It has to do with money. It also has to do with the declining equity markets, the huge debt levels that consumers are taking on. And again, the Shanghai index is now in deep bear territory, down over 25%. And again, the reason Apple is losing shares in China is because of competitors with more innovative and cheaper products. But they're blaming it on trade. And when you read your trend alert, you know what to blame. And it's rising interest rates. It's the stopping of the flow of monetary meth. It's why we heard today from Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas President Robert Kaplan said the U.S. Central Bank should put interest rates on hold. That's what we see happening. They're going to put interest rates on hold. And that's why gold is going up. That's right, getting closer to that $1,300 an ounce mark. And again, we had forecast the bottom being around $1,200. It at $1,185. So we believe the bottom of gold is bottomed. And the top Again, it has to go over $1,450 an ounce to find real strength, but we can see where this is going. Also, what brought the markets down, Thursday's decline in equities was accelerated by a weaker than expected reading in the U.S. manufacturing sector. ISM's manufacturing index fell to 54.1 in December, which was a lot lower than expected. So we're seeing a deceleration around the globe. What's going to save it? Temporarily, another flow of cheap money. Oil prices went up today because they're cutting back production over there in OPEC land, and they're saying that they're going to cut back enough where supply and demand will equal out a little bit better. And so oil prices went up temporarily. And what else do we have here? Well, again, key reading of the manufacturing sector falls to lowest level in more than 2 years. As I said, they're going to try to boost the economy with cheap money. Every country. Beijing moves to boost small business loans. The latest rule tweak in effect encourages bank loans to more small companies, the central bank said. It also said it would add 100 billion yuan quota to its re-lending program to encourage more bank loans. They're going to do everything they can to juice the markets because there's a slowdown, and what people are looking beyond, but that's right in front of them, is the real estate slowdown. Again, I mentioned what's going on in Australia and what's going on in the States and what's going on right here in New York. Manhattan real estate closes 2018 as worst year since the financial crisis. Home sales fell 14% last year. What's also hurt this is the new tax law that Trump put into place that limits the deductibility of the state and local taxes. And surrounding this whole issue again is all that cheap money that they pumped into the system. And what has that done? You know, we've been writing about it now for the better part of a year. And now the Wall Street Journal is writing about it as well. Taking stock of the world's growing debt, at nearly $250 trillion, there is now more debt globally than ever, presenting challenges as central banks pull back on easy money policies. No kidding. We've been saying that number for how long and talking about these problems. The figure is 3 times what it was 2 decades ago. The biggest borrowers, the U.S., China, Eurozone, and Japan, which have more than 2/3 of the world's household debt, 3/4 of corporate debt, and nearly 80% of government debt. And here in the United States, consumer debt is now at $4 trillion as we go into 2019. What does that do? Well, record corporate debt stirs new worries. U.S. corporate debt has climbed to roughly 46% of gross domestic product, the highest on record. What's going to happen as interest rates go up? Oh, they're going to go down, but they've gone up. And you got to pay more for mortgages. That's why home sales are going down. And you have to pay more to service your debt. Oh, as your earnings are going down, as your profits are going down, how are you going to pay the debt even at these interest rate levels? We'll see. Because what's propped the markets up, 2 things. Besides the cheap money flow, stock buybacks, and merger and acquisition activity, which has slowed dramatically, but they're still at it, The monopolization of the world continues. Bristol Myers to buy Celgene in a $74 billion deal. Isn't that wonderful? Make those big farmers bigger so they could keep raising prices, monopolize the industry, and they'll get whatever they want because they control the governments. Oh, the big news in the States here. Nancy Pelosi reclaims House Speaker's gavel as Democrats prepare to take on Trump. Nancy out of her mind Pelosi. And then you got the other freak on the other side, McConnell on the Senate, the Republican. You look at these people, you listen to them. How could anybody believe this freak show? I bring it up because I was talking about the corporate-controlled America. That's right. As we see these mergers and acquisitions and the monopolies get bigger, who makes it possible? Your Democrats and Republicans and your leaders in a country near you. And moving on, Congo stifles news on vote tally. We've been talking about this again. One freak show after another around the world. Had an election over there in Bangladesh. Nobody believes that one either. But I say we should get involved in the Congo because why not? We could steal what they have and make an excuse that we're doing it to preserve democracy, because that's what our U.S. Secretary of State is now doing down in Brazil, bringing in that former army captain who loved the previous dictators of Brazil, the other military dictators, Bolsonaro. Pompeo and Brazil's new government target Venezuela. The U.S. has serious problems with the Venezuelan government, said Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He said he was interested in meeting with U.S. allies in, quote, returning democracy to Venezuela. It isn't just Brazil, though, because Pompeo met with Colombian President Ivan Duque, talking up the idea of, quote, restoring democratic rule in Venezuela and ousting, quote, the dictatorship. That's today's news. It's old news. It's history before it happens. Go back to our November Trends Journal. Triangles of death, economic disaster, social unrest. And what we wrote was that on a regional level, Bolsonaro has expressed his disdain against Venezuelan government, saying that country should no longer be a member of Mercosur, the South American trade bloc, and that he would break diplomatic ties with Venezuela. Argentinian President Macri has planned to report Venezuela's government to the International Criminal Court, The Hague, for alleged crimes against humanity, and adding to growing speculation that Colombia and Brazil are planning to topple Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Colombia's Vice President Marta Lucía Ramirez, whose country is facing an influx of over 1 million Venezuelan refugees, warned of, quote, growing unrest and anarchy that will spread across the region. So you can see it. They're heating up for a war against Venezuela. Trump said Syria is sand and death. We're getting out. Trump, Afghan invasion, bankrupted the Soviet Union, and he wants to talk about getting out. It wasn't only an invasion that bankrupted the Soviet Union, other things did. And as I've said many times, if Alexander the Great couldn't pull it off, if the British couldn't pull it off, if the Russians couldn't pull it off, the Americans wouldn't pull it off. And they haven't, and they won't. But most Americans, narrow majority of Americans back Trump's drawdowns in Syria and Afghanistan, and the polls showed a narrow 54 to 64% majority in favor of keeping troops in both Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. But how about the rest of us that want to occupy peace? Peace is the future. Peace and prosperity, not more war. We're going into a serious economic decline. You're going to see more and more uprisings and more military intervention to push them down. Because when all else fails, they take you to war. Whether it's the United States, what's going to be going on in Israel, because what Pompeo is also saying, the United States will not stand by and watch the Iranian regime's destructive policies place international stability and security at risk. Pompeo said, the United States issued a preemptive warning to Iran on Thursday, today, against pursuing 3 planned space rocket launches that it said would violate a UN Security Council resolution because they use ballistic missile technology. Quote, the United States will not stand by and watch the Iranian regime's destructive policies place international stability and security at risk, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a statement. Pompeo said the rocket launches would violate United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231, which endorsed a 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and the world powers. Oh yeah, that's the one that President Trump pulled out of. But yet they're saying that they're violating it? That shows you what sickness is ruling this nation and others. But it's okay for Israel to continue to violate international law and steal Palestinian land or send missiles and bombs into Syria. Yeah, that's okay. What hypocrisy. Again, when all else fails, they take you to war. And whether it's going to be against Venezuela or Iran, be prepared. This is Gerald Celente, and that's some of today's Trends in the Noon.